All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Chasing Edges podcast. Got an absolute brilliant mind in front of me coming from the Serrano Circle as well. That's how I got introduced. But we got Dylan Seeley on today, a chiropractor based here in Columbus, Ohio. Dill, thanks for hopping on.
Always a pleasure, man.
Dude, we might have to fix these mic stands. I got new mic stands. If you followed the podcast last time, I snapped them in Doc's basement. Now, just quick background. Obviously, he's a chiropractor, but then is a master in the physical therapy and self-assessment world. I really enjoy talking to him. But yeah, a little background for the people.
So I kind of have a weird transition into chiropractic. So I started in strength conditioning. I came up under Justin Kavanaugh, so like Olympic sprint coach, NFL shit, does all this stuff. So I came up under him, worked with him for years, and then I was about to graduate undergrad, and I was like, all right, I'm going to come back to work for you. And he was like, the fuck you are. And I was like, what do you mean? So he's like, if you want to work back here, you have to have a doctorate in something.
Let's
I'm like,
go.
Oh, shit. All right. So now I'm thinking, like, what do I want to do? So I looked into, like, cellular molecular physiology because I had a huge interest in that route. But I was like, fuck, that's like 8 years of school to go get a master's, get a PhD, and do all this shit. So then I looked at physical therapy school, so I was applying to this, and I didn't realize that if you wanted to go to physical therapy school, you apply to like a fucking clearinghouse first. And then from there, they send your transcripts to the actual school.
Interesting. So like you're taking like the whatever is it, GRE, GMAT, and it's going through that school. Yeah.
You go through like GREs, but then you also have like your undergraduate stuff. You send off your transcripts to the clearinghouse, and then the clearinghouse sends your transcripts to the school. So it's like a middleman that you have to pay for no reason whatsoever.
Sounds about right.
So I did this shit late, so I sent it off, and by the time like the application was due, it didn't get there until 2 weeks after.
That's true.
So now I can't go to PT school. So I'm like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do now? And at the time I was still playing rugby. And my rugby coach was like, why not just be a chiropractor? And I was like, I have no idea what the fuck that is. So he was like, let me take you to my chiropractor. I'll show you what this stuff's like. And then, so I went to the chiropractor. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And he was like, yeah, we actually give out scholarships for rugby to go to chiropractic school.
Oh, giddy up.
Yeah, I was like, get the fuck out of here. So I like shot a message to the coach, like at this one school, like the next day. They got back to me. They were like, all right, come down to campus. Let's see what you got. Went there, practiced with them a little bit, and they were like, all right, we'll throw some money at you. Like, here you go. So I was coming in at like 50% like scholarship right off the bat. And I was
that's
like,
awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of how my transition happened. I literally found out about chiropractic school like 2 weeks before actually going to chiropractic school.
And you got to play rugby, so it's a win-win. Yeah, let's go, dude. I didn't know that. That's really cool. The chiropractic, obviously we'll touch on that heavy. Just the chiropractic deal is, I mean, it's something I've always used playing, and I know a lot of people use to remedy issues, and I think a lot of things compound in modern life to back problems and stuff, so like that gets thrown into the chiropractors right away. But as far as like your growth from like college to starting to apply it, where'd you start applying it? Like, did you mentor anybody as you got out of chiropractic school?
So I kind of took a weird route because I always, was under Serrano, and he loves to dabble in that type of stuff. And then we call it like our preceptorship, like an internship pretty much. So your last semester, or we go in trimester. So our last trimester of school, like you go work in a clinic like in the real world, because all the shit you do inside of school, it's fantastic, but you're just working on like healthy students. Like no one really has a problem. And so I get thrown into the real world, and now I've got people coming in with like fused low backs from literally the entire lumbar spine, and this person, you can't manipulate them. So now what are you going to do?
Yeah. So I guess the bad way of saying it. So how prepared? So you didn't feel very prepared?
None whatsoever.
Yeah, that's super interesting to me. But yeah, go ahead, keep going.
So they teach you like some of the stuff, and you'll kind of like go through it and be like, oh, okay, this is easy. Like and I guess it's like case by case. So like some clinics, like they don't get hard cases at all. It's literally like the simplest of shit. Like people coming on my neck's tight, just crack my neck.
White collar problems. Yeah,
that's easy. So the clinic that I did my internship at, that I work at now, literally the exact fucking opposite. So we have like cases where people are like fused completely, or they've got such bad nerve damage, like their leg is completely atrophied, or they're coming in like post stroke, but they still want you to work on their neck, and like all this wild shit. Right. So I'm like, I didn't learn about half this shit in school. I'm literally like learning about these new like diseases on the fly. Serrano will send me someone who's got like some wild disease that only happens in 2% of the population. He was like, here, fix this. And I'm literally like learning this shit the night before, trying to study as much as I can and then work on this guy. So preparedness, like, not so much coming out of school. So it's a lot of just learning shit on the fly and then just diving deeper down to these routes, chasing these edges, going into this wormhole of stuff. So luckily I had like the chiropractor I work for was able to kind of show me this stuff because, I pretty much just shadow them your first few weeks of the internship anyway. So I'm getting to see how he's interacting with people, how he's, breaking down these diagnoses, explaining it back to these people, how he's interacting with other, doctors that we refer to or they refer to us. So it's pretty cool. So I got a really quick crash course of what it's going to be like. And then it's like, all right, cool. Now you're thrown out on your own. Go do this shit.
Giddy up. Yeah, no, that's, I like that a lot. Just because again, like people think once you finish up your education, you're forever qualified. And like, it's the same, I have the same qualms with college. And then there's this whole bit where, I got a great education in college. It took me 10 years to unlearn it. Yeah, but that's where I appreciate and then I respect the hell out of guys like you, Dr. Toma and Dr. Serrano, who all have been on here, just the constant learning and the constant evolution and constant adapting to new research or new supplements or anything like that. So I obviously through that preparation, those kind of things, you've eventually bled that into sports now. Yeah. So your athletes range from high school to pro fighters for the most part, right?
I've got a weird spectrum. I've got just youth track athletes, 10, 12 years old. I've got some high school, lacrosse, high school track. I've got my pro Muay Thai, other guys UFC, Bellator. I've worked with that. So I've got just a weird spectrum of shit. So I kind of have to know a little bit of everything, understand the demands of the sport, and then be able to train around it and rehab it from that standpoint too.
Yeah, so something I think you do really well is you kind of look at the organism as a whole. And I guess I don't want to get too far away from chiropractic initially. How do you apply? So obviously you're training them physically, strength and conditioning, mobility assessment and those kind of things. But you're also are you doing your chiropractic work on them alongside of this training?
Yeah, so a lot of the times we kind of have this weird transition stage. So people come in super fucked up, and then I'll get them kind of back to normal, and then it's okay. Well, now we actually need to go apply it in the gym because just because you're healthy, it's not the same as being healthy in the gym.
Yeah,
right? That's a hard learned fact that a lot of people have gone through. So now it's reintroducing stuff back into the gym. Okay, cool. All right, you actually want to be serious about your training. You want to compete at the highest level. Okay, now let's train for real. So It's just this 3-step approach of getting them out of pain, being that bridge between pain to, actually going back into the gym and then now excelling in the gym.
Yeah. And then even from a rehab standpoint, obviously chiropractic's applied a lot as well, where I guess my learning curve with it, I didn't really get into chiropractic use till I was in the NFL. But I learned quick that it's a temporary reset. What you truly need to do is assess muscle strength, asymmetries, because even though they reset you, all those compensation patterns are going to pull the bones back into the problem area. Is that pretty relative?
So I'll give you a little quick crash course in chiro history. Yeah. So it started out
the history is clacky.
It's fucking weird, dude.
Yeah.
It's all
feed me. Yeah.
So it started out with this one guy who was just pushing around on shit and found that if you popped a joint or a bone, it's made people feel really good. And then this weird story came along where this guy was deaf and he cracked his neck and then he could hear, and I was it's kind of fucking sketchy. But dude, they're all fucking weird from there. His son gets even fucking weirder. It just keeps going. It's this lineage of things. So anyway, they came up with this concept, the bone goes out of place, it fucks with nerve function, and then if you want to live your most optimal life, I've got to pop this thing back in. Now we've kind of learned that's not really the case. If your bone goes out of place, you're probably not going to come see me. I want you to go to the fucking ER.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a good thing.
Yeah.
So now we've kind of moved on from that concept. It's more so about I hate to call it dysfunction, but shit's just not working right as it should.
Yeah.
In that area. And you can get that from just increased tension, spasms. Anyone who's ever been locked up and they try and twist, they know that for a fact.
Yeah.
So by at least cracking that neck, cracking that back, I can release that pressure. I get that muscle to relax real quick. And now it opens up just this window of opportunity that we can kind of go in and do what we need to do. So I always tell people yes, it's going to be great if I crack your back for the next, 5 minutes to 5 hours, but it's what do we do within that time frame that's going to make this last.
I got you. So, and that's just, is that just playing on the nervous system for those short windows?
Yeah,
so
pretty much that window of opportunity, because you can get the same thing through massage or A-stem, scraping and stuff like that. They're all little things to modulate the nervous system to kind of decrease that threat perception that you got at the time.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's just building it back up.
Interesting. Yeah. As far then, like, is there a window of time after chiropractic that, or like an adjustment? Sorry, I stopped saying the word chiropractic, but after an adjustment that like you should start trying to keep the bones in place, kind of stuff. Like, is there like a strength window or?
Not so much like a window, and like same thing with like the bones thing. Like they don't actually go out of place. It's more so just like the tension of like how we perceive it. Right, because it kind of distorts like that mechanoreception in the area, like how we process things and the sensations. Right, so not to go like too into the science of it, but like we have this thing called like a cortical homunculus, and it's how our brain creates like a map of our body. Now, if there's some weird shit going on, like tension or everything else, it can kind of like distort it. We call this like cortical smudging. So we kind of, don't perceive an area as well as we should. And now if I stimulate the mechanoreceptors in that area, it kind of brings back this normal sensation, so my brain can map it out a little bit better.
No, I like that a lot. So like, that's why like the RPR and things along those lines are effective, because like they're helping with the mapping.
They just stimulate the hell out of you pretty much. So when they jam up into you, you can kind of figure out, it's like, oh shit, someone's rubbing in this thing really hard. One, the tension like is going to like them digging into you is kind of stimulating a bunch of stuff within that area. But two, it just kind of naturally, almost like fight or flight, like it scares the shit out of you when someone's digging into you that hard.
Well, yeah, I've heard it said that like any manual manipulation, but particularly like the trigger pointing or the RPR, which is Cal Dietz's program. Yep. It plays on your body's response to being stabbed. Yeah, basically is what it does. I like that analogy, but like it does make sense. But like now the mapping makes sense, because I'm a big believer in like the mind-body connection or like neuromuscular control and that kind of thing. How do you use those for your practice and for performance?
So I get like a wide range of stuff. So sometimes you'll get people coming in that are amputees that have like, we call it like phantom limb pain. Like their hand hurts even though they don't have a hand anymore. Right?
That's crazy.
Because this cortical mapping is all screwed up now, and they can't figure out what the hell is going on. So you can literally, we call it like mirror therapy, where you literally put a mirror up against their good hand, like, or the only hand they pretty much fucking have.
Yeah. Like take my strong hand. Yeah.
So you put a mirror up against it, and you can kind of simulate it so it looks like you actually have your other hand. And now like it's starting to like reshape that cortical map that's going on in their head, and now the pain is gone. Right, so there's a bunch of weird shit that you can do.
That's bananas. That's awesome.
So you look at that. There's other people where it's like coming off of like low back pain. Like I'll have people just same thing with cortical mapping. Like you can literally just look in a mirror and bend over, put your hands on your back, and do all this stuff and kind of feel around, so you can get a better perception of how your body moves in space, and that can help with the mapping as well. So it's just even small shit like that makes a big difference.
Which is just it's crazy what the eyes can accomplish in general, and like how much effect it has on the brain and the feeling. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Dang, that's so just I just want to retrace back to massage paired with chiropractic real quick too. Order of operations for particularly an athlete.
I will usually have people go like massage first. So we have an amazing like massage therapist at our work. So she'll massage someone and kind of like, I pretty much just call it like tenderizing the meat, and then it's so much easier for me to go and do my manipulation. Yeah. So I literally, sometimes when I have to press hard, I literally just bend someone's neck, and it's like, fucking goes. So it makes my life so much easier, because if someone's super locked up too, like me blasting into you is the least comfortable thing in the world. So like people that are coming off of like auto accidents, so I've got a couple that I'm seeing right now, like they are so locked up that they can't turn their head like at all. Like, and I'm like, I can blast into this thing, but it's going to hurt like a son of a bitch. Like, it's probably going to feel better if you go get a massage like first and work into that. So that way when I, crack into you, it's not like the end of the world.
Yeah. I had a chiropractor in Minnesota very briefly. And so he told me to get the massage after and like do my strengthening stuff after. And then I get to Houston and I'm working with Dr. Casey Ho. He does like the acupuncture stuff, but he's also a chiropractor. So he does all his acupuncture and then he adjusts you after. And then obviously I'm just stacking all my habits, pretty like off days in the season. Tuesday's your off day, so I'm trying to get all my stuff done. And so I started asking these questions, and he laid it out basically how you're saying it as well, where no, like go get your massage, like come to me correct. And then so basically like the progression ended up being massage, acupuncture, and then chiropractic reset. So like, and that held the longest term effects for me too. And then obviously I'm strength training and fixing weaknesses and asymmetries and injuries and all that kind of stuff along the way. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out into the world because I think obviously
it's a really common misconception with stuff. So I kind of think of it as like progression of force. Like I want to go from like least to most. So like me blasting into your neck is probably going to be like the most like not super aggressive, but it's
from
going to
be rehabilitation standpoint
compared to like someone massaging you. That's going to feel a hell of a lot better than like me like cracking your back's going to feel good, but it's a lot more force that's put into it than someone just kind of like rubbing on your skin.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good progression. Then as far like obviously as far as applying the chiropractic to athletes, how often do you think guys should use it? Is it like a case by case? Obviously, I'm sure, but like
I would say it's case by case. Like for the more active you are, like the better it is. Like because for some people, it's really like we'll say like for Gen Pop, like it's really just about getting you back to functioning like normal. But when you're an athlete, like it's really tough to maintain a normal because you're beating the shit out of yourself every single day, whether it be practice or a game. So what I'm trying to do is I think of it like a battery. Like I'm charged at 100%, like at the start of the season, or at least I'm trying to be.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
And then you go into camp, and then next thing you know, you're down to like 30%. So you're trying to keep like getting back up to that 100 as best as you can. So that's why you got to throw in all these modalities, whether it be like IV drips, massages, chiro, physical therapy, whatever it is. And we got to throw this stuff in because we're trying to use all these things to get you back up to 100%. Because the next day you're just going to deplete that battery all over again.
Yeah.
For some people it could be if you're in pain initially, it could just be I'll see people maybe like 2-3 times a week. Now we kind of get you back to a baseline. It might be, it could be once a week if you're super active and doing all this stuff. It could be, every couple weeks. It just depends on the level of activity. Because there's some people I'm like, check back with me in like 8 weeks.
Yeah, well, we've talked about it before too, where like even like the CrossFitters of the world and stuff, like you'll come in, reset them, and like but they'll eventually be back. They're repeat offenders, but a lot of people you'll just see once or twice, and like you get the reset you're looking for. Correct? Yeah. I think that's again like probably a bad question on my part, but I just I want athletes to incorporate it as much as possible because I like how you implement like the system as a whole, particularly because you incorporate breath work in with some of your athletes as well. Can you talk about how you do that?
So we'll play around with a couple different breathing things. So when people usually come to me, it is when they're, in pain more often than not. So what we'll do is the easiest thing to decrease the threat, like of what's going on, is to change my breathing. Right. So I'll throw them up into a 90-90 position, and we'll just go through some like light, gentle breathing. Now, depending upon, what's going on, it might change. So we might do like a 1 to 2. So for every second I inhale, I'm going to exhale twice as long. Now, if I've got something where like someone is really bad anxiety, really bad stress, like they're probably not going to be able to maintain that. They're going to freak out by breathing out that long. So then we'll go box breathing. So we might go 2 seconds in, hold for 2, out for 2, hold for 2, and then just repeat that cycle and gradually work up our numbers. So breath work is literally every single appointment. Like the first appointment, everyone gets breath work. Doesn't matter what's going on. Like I want to get you to be able to control, because like we're going to be stressed no matter what. No matter if you're an athlete or if you're just a normal person. Like you got stress, you got to learn how to deal with it throughout the day. And a lot of people now, like our sleep is fucked up.
Trash,
like,
yeah.
Like people struggle to sleep. We're up watching TV super late. We're on our phones super late. Everyone struggles with sleep, especially here in the winter. Like sun, we're not rising up with the sun now. So everything is really screwed up. So the one thing I can do to calm myself down that's super easy and takes no money, no effort to do, is just breathe. Yeah,
it's super easy. And it's simple and significant. I say it all the time on the podcast just because I think it's massively overlooked. It's like it's a pillar of performance that's never been, like nobody's really coached in it, nobody's really educated in it, and like that's why I love that you implement it into your practice. One, like I think it's perfect to like get them in a state just to work on them. I think that's incredibly effective because that's in essence what you're doing. Like you're starting them there, or at least like because like those are majority the two things you spoke on are mostly down regulatory tools. Yeah, and like that's not rocket surgery. Like you can do it in traffic, you can do it anything before anything stressful, physically, emotionally, even like just from an anxious standpoint of like public speaking or anything like that. That's why I really like the breathwork and application for Gen Pop. Most people think now it's either like a yoga thing or like athletes are doing it like Adesanya. They're doing it to be like the most aerobically efficient human on the planet. But structurally now, as you transition that, actually something else popped in my head. as far as like obviously like sleep's messed up because of technology and those kind of things, but like in the chiropractic world, like the shoes, the raised heel, and obviously extended periods of sitting. I wanted to hit on this. I just missed it earlier. How do you see that stuff compound into problems?
I mean, sitting in general is just tough. It's kind of funny. So we've looked at a lot of research. We've spent millions of dollars on ergonomics for chairs and shit, and we've only found out that it doesn't really do anything. All this money, we haven't found a solution whatsoever. Like, people are coming in with back pain more and more often now. So now we have this idea of a standing desk, right?
Yeah.
So standing desk is fantastic because people love to use it, and they go, oh, it's because I'm off my feet, I'm not sitting anymore. What realistically is happening is that when you're sitting, like, you're not moving. Like, we've been in the same spot the whole time. We might fidget here for like a second, but we're not doing a whole lot. Well, when you're on your feet, like, it sucks to stand in one position too long. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna walk around, you're gonna kind of bounce around from side to side. So you're getting movement. So at the end of the day, it's like movement, right?
Yeah.
I saw this, like, I think it was in a newspaper, it was a little comic, and it was like the best fix for, like, or best stretches for things that you can do for back pain at the office. And it was like, get up from your chair, bend down, put your shoes on, open up the door, and just walk out and leave. Right? Like, that's the best thing that you can do, is just go for a walk, get out of the way,
get blood flow, get all the above. Yeah,
exactly. So that makes a big difference. Shoes, like, so I've, like, recently, so I deal with a lot of feet stuff so for me, like, especially with my athletes, I deal with a lot of track athletes as well. And like recently marathoners. And the big thing now is Hokas, right? Like, everyone loves this Hoka shoe, like, for my marathoners. So what it is, it's called like a rocker. I don't know that. Yeah, it's a rocker sole. So it's kind of like, you remember like the Skechers, like
the shape ups.
Yeah, the shape ups, dude. They're pretty much just like rebranded shape ups.
Okay.
All right, just not as aggressive as like the bottom part of it. But it's still got this little rounded slope thing, so that, like, when you hit, it just naturally rolls your foot forward for you. So it just gets you under your toes so you can push off. The only problem is that it just jams me forward. So I'm missing, like, using my heel strike to set something up or delay, because all this shit kind of impacts one another, because if I'm going to heel strike or if I'm going to midfoot strike, I need to use my hamstring to kind of delay, like, my knee extension so I can bring my hip over top.
Okay.
Right? But what happens is, if I just get rolled through, well, now I can't use my hamstring's still getting used, but not to a great extent. So now I'm just kind of jamming my hip through really hard, and a lot of people are coming in with, like, psoas tightness, like hip flexors are pretty nasty, and plantar fasciitis. Like, these are the weird things I see, because you're not really using your foot anymore. You're literally just, stepping on something that just rolls you forward.
Yeah.
Rather than actually, like, hitting the ground, pushing off, and doing all this stuff. So again, something that was meant to be beneficial is now screwing people up.
Yeah, will you see that in general with, like, baseline shoes? Like, if you see people with X problem, do you start by, like, do you prescribe bare feet? Do you flat shoes? Anything like that?
I do. Like, I want people to, because we have so many receptors on the bottom of our foot.
Yeah, that's, right? I mean, all that, I think it's the most dense acupuncture points as well. Yeah.
So what I have people do, that's why I love our turf, because I can literally just get people barefoot moving around on our turf.
Yeah.
Because that, like, it's going to stimulate your feet like crazy, so you can actually get some feeling back into that stuff. Because I kind of break it down like this, like, shoes are pretty much like condoms. They're great for protection, but you can't feel shit when you wear them, right? So it's easy.
Yes, I love it.
So it's fantastic because, like, if I'm running around, like, on concrete, or what's going on nowadays, I'm sure, like, out here there's probably some glass bottles.
Yeah, right when I moved in, I started walking around barefoot, and then, like, there's like 2 broken 40s down there in the corner. I was like, maybe not the right environment. Yeah.
So it's not like we're out in nature.
I need my condoms. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not out in nature where I can walk around, like, barefoot and be fine. So we kind of it's a necessary adaptation. Now, if I'm out on the farm, like, I don't give a shit. I'm just gonna walk. I walk around barefoot there 24/7. Doesn't matter how hot or how cold it is. It feels good as hell to have your feet out and just walking around on the grass.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, but so, yeah, I mean, yeah, we always joke around that, like, the first couple missteps in technology were shoes and furniture.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just from, like, a functional movement standpoint, but, like, I like the kind of no furniture concept too, where, like, if you truly don't have furniture, like, how mobile are you? If you're going down to sit on the ground, you're obviously working ankle, hip, constant mobility, and I just think it kind of starts solving a lot of our problems for us. Exactly. if you like regress back to nature in general.
Yeah, so with that, like, when I played rugby up in Pittsburgh, like, we had pretty much half our team was Polynesian. So the big thing at the end for them was kava. Like, so we would form a kava circle. There's no chairs there. So when we would literally just sit, like, in a circle on the ground, right? So you got to have good hips to be able to do all this stuff. So it's like one of those adaptations. Same thing like when you eat, like we would literally just eat sitting around on the floor, and we would have like a table where we would have our food, but it was like a really low table.
Yeah, it's like kind of like the Asian culture. Yeah.
So you would literally just sit around the whole time, like, and have to have this great hip mobility to be able to do all this stuff. And now we don't really have to worry about it anymore because we're sitting in chairs. I mean, shit, this chair here is like
ridiculous. Yeah, I know, sorry.
But yeah, so I mean, just like those little changes in technology, we think it's so much better, but in the long term, it's like it's more so about like convenience than it is like looking at long-term repercussions. It's great in the moment, but 20, 30 years down the road, like, is it great so much? Probably not. Yeah,
there's a lot of killer conveniences these days. Like, and obviously, like the phone affects all those kind of things too. But to get back to the breathing, obviously you spoke briefly on controlling state and getting into like a state to even be worked on or approach the performance state. Mechanically, how do you use breathing to supplement your practice or your training?
I do a couple different things. So practice wise, it's really so just about like teaching them like why we breathe, what are some of the benefits of it, how can I control it, because people don't even realize that they're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things. So it's like for them, it's like so we touched a little bit on like CO2 and O2 and doing all this stuff and like regulation. But for them, I break it down really simple because when we breathe in, we get stimulated. When we breathe out is when we relax. Yep. And most people fuck this up and they think, oh, I got to take this deep breath in because that's what's going to give me like, this clarity and relaxation. Clarity, yes, because when I breathe in, like call it like the locus coeruleus, it sits within the brain.
Yep.
This is like responsible for pretty much like arousal and heightened attention. So when I breathe in, and it also deals with like CO2 tolerance and stuff like that. So when I breathe in, like this thing gets stimulated a little bit, but when I breathe in, I also get respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So my heart rate goes faster. And the reason is because I want to pump out all this oxygenated blood now. Right. So when I breathe out, it's the exact opposite. Everything just starts to calm me down. So if I've got someone who's like constantly amped up, well, now we're going to spend all this time breathing out and breathing out and breathing out because it's going to calm them down. But twofold, when I breathe out, it brings my rib cage down. So if I got someone with low back pain who can't, flex their low back and crush down, because in order to do that, my ribs also have to come down.
Yep.
So if they're struggling with the motor control, I can literally just have them breathe and breathe out as much as they can. And now their low back starts to round, it starts to relax without me having to do anything.
Let's go.
So it's a real simple trick for me to use.
Yeah, we always just like we start just breaking down like obviously like sympathetic, parasympathetic. We'll call it up regulation or down regulation, but like the same thing. Like we try and make every tool in the breathwork world as binary as possible. Like so, nose down regulation, mouth up regulation, inhale up regulation, exhale down regulation. Then what he was talking about is when you inhale, the rib cage goes up and externally rotates, and then on the exhale, down and internally rotates. But I never thought about the application to low back pain as well in that world, because obviously you're getting that parasympathetic rest tone to that exhale. That I like that a lot. That's a good little application. Then we're with the Mind Strong stuff, we're pretty big on like opening up the rib cage in general, but also maintaining lower abdominal muscles and psoas and that kind of thing. Do you see a massive amount of like neglected psoas in your line of work, and even with athletes too?
It's more so positional than anything. So everything's kind of based around like that rib cage and pelvis relationship. It's like, can you get in and out of these positions? And a lot of people just struggle because with the world that we live in, like it's kind of based around extension, right? Yeah. So we miss out on a lot of flexion. If you want to be a powerful athlete, you need to be able to handle a lot of extension, right? Because that's just sprinting, that's powerlifting, that's anything.
Triple extension in general, yeah.
But the problem is like, can you get out of it?
Yeah.
And no, now we've got some fucking issues because a lot of people don't realize the sympathetic like ganglions lay towards the back side of the spine. So when my like erectors are lit up, I can usually tell someone's like very sympathetically driven, right? Who has the most like yoked erectors? Powerlifters. Who has the jerkiest movement and can't relax and their heart rates are at 130 24/7. Powerlifters, right? So it's literally just about getting them in and out of these positions. So I can like utilize some of this stuff to then get them to relax, get these ribs down, get all this other stuff, which then helps with my hip flexors, right, my psoas, without ever having to do shit to my psoas. If I can literally just get my rib cage down, well, now it's going to exert an influence on my psoas without me having to touch it. I still work into it, but it's just like a 2-for-1. So if I can get the ribs down, it kind of takes some pressure off that, and then I just do some manual work into it as well.
I didn't think as much about that relationship, but I like that a lot. So like as like a self-assessment people can do at home, like where's like a good place to start when you're like trying to open that up, activate any of those muscles or mobility?
I would say a quick assessment that I use is have people lying like hook line. So essentially it's like you're lying on your back, with your knees bent up but your feet on the ground.
Yep.
And then what you can do is you can put your hand underneath like your smaller back, so your low back. And
Yep.
what you're going to try and do is crush down on that as hard as you possibly can. So I can see, like, if you can crush down pretty hard, great. We've got some movement in there. We can get in and out of these positions. But a lot of people struggle to crush all the way down, or if you feel like you have to lift your neck up in the process to do it. So that's how I can tell, like, can I move it independently of everything else? Like, yes, okay, cool, we're doing pretty well so far. If no, we've got some issues that we need to address. And I can do the same thing for overhead work. So my overhead mobility, same thing, can be limited by that rib cage mobility. So I'll have people reach all the way back as far as they can.
In the same laying position?
Yep, in that same position. And then what we'll do is, it's easier if you have somebody with you, is I'll put my hand on their lower ribs and I'll have them breathe out as much as they can. I say, breathe out until you feel like you're going to pass out. And then at the same time, I press down on their ribs and you'll see their arms come forward like a slingshot. They'll pop up like 5 to 6 inches. So that, true overhead position you have really isn't overhead whatsoever. It almost looks like you're doing an incline bench rather than a shoulder press.
Yeah. That's super functional. On the excuse me, on the first test, why does the chin raise?
Because it's trying to gain motion from somewhere else. So the lumbar spine has the same curvature as the cervical spine. They're both like lordotic, so they kind of curve in towards the front, whereas the thoracic spine is kyphotic. It curves more towards like the back.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, like, we're going to try and sneak motion somewhere else. So if I'm trying to, get motion like pressing down, I'm pretty much going from lordotic to kyphotic in the low back because we're trying to take away that curve. So now it's going to change my thoracic, and in turn, it's going to lift my head up off of it because it's suppressing my rib cage down again at the same time. Yeah. So now, again, my neck, like my SC joint, so like your clavicle or your collarbone connects up to that sternum. Yep. We have our sternocleidomastoid, which runs from that SC joint to pretty much the back of my head almost. So now if I lift, my rib cage starts to depress. Now my head is going to get pulled up because of those SCMs.
I got you. Interesting. So that's just, and what's the next step to like self-remedy after that?
Working these positions, like finding out like how to loosen some things up. So again, just working that in general, like just practicing that skill. Now, if I suck at it, I can, again, like go through the breathing stuff that we talked about. That helps a little bit. Going through like, I call it like a constraint. It pretty much is this. It's a constraints-based approach. So if I'm struggling to do something like initially and I try my hardest and I still can't figure it out, we'll put a constraint around the task. So what we'll do is if you're lying, like say like on a bench, like in the gym, I can grab a hold of the bench and pull up into the bench as hard as I can. And what you'll notice is that your ribs come down.
Yeah.
Right? So now I'm internally rotating. That's helping me flatten down my back. And now in this position, I crush down my back. And what I do is
laying on the bench. Okay, yeah.
So I'm in that hook line position. So now I'm crushing my back down into the bench. Okay, now I'm starting to feel what it should feel like. And then I slowly let it go of my pressure and I try and keep that position. And we'll just keep practicing this. And eventually you'll get to a point where you don't have to grab the bench anymore. And now you're able to go through this stuff.
All right, that makes sense. I like that a lot. Yeah. I just, as somebody that's like kind of pursued like the right activation methods, I kind of I open and activate myself like inside out, kind of like the Douglas Heel method stuff that Serrano's done, and you've read that at least, correct?
Yeah.
Have you done his program, the Be Activated program?
No, but I actually got to talk to him when he was with Serrano, so we were shooting the shit over a bunch of stuff and just doing some deep dives into pain and everything else. He's a super smart dude. Yeah,
I just like his thought pattern, his firing pattern, and that kind of stuff. So like, from what I absorbed from that, at least, like obviously I was already in the breath world, obviously. And I tried to affect what he was trying to affect, but then like from a muscular standpoint, I was trying to mimic the 1, 2, 3 firing pattern. So I was trying to get so if I always say this bit where like if I had to like walk out the door and run a 40-yard dash right now, I'm gonna trigger point and activate my psoas. So that gives my glutes a chance to fire, and now I can be like the 1, 2, 3, so that the quad and the abs don't compensate for that hip flexion that is really triggered from the psoas.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a pretty decent approach?
I say yeah, but I also kind of flip it on its head a little bit. For me, it's the hamstring,
okay,
more so than like the glutes. So everyone's got this big hard on for the glutes nowadays.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, if you stand up and you just bend your hips a little bit, squeeze your ass as hard as you can, and you'll maybe move an inch. Right?
Say that one more time.
So if you stand up, like if you go, say like you're going to set up for a deadlift, just like break at the hips. Now squeeze your ass as hard as you can. Like you'll maybe move an inch forward.
Yeah.
It doesn't do a whole lot. It has a very, very small range of motion, but it's very, very powerful.
Okay.
Right. What it has to happen is your hamstring, which actually the fibers run like vertical.
Yep.
Like that's what actually propels you like forward, and then your glutes just finish off that last little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like we'll do a lot of like hamstring based work in really goofy positions to train you to be able to handle some of the stuff, because again, my hamstring feeds up into, a lot of people don't realize this, but my hamstring feeds up into like my, call it like a dorsal sacral ligament, right? So it's pretty much like it blends into a ligament that runs over top my tailbone.
Okay.
All right. This dorsal sacral ligament blends into my thoracolumbar fascia. My lat feeds into that thoracolumbar fascia from the opposite side. So this is why like on our left hamstring, if we've had like a right lat like injury, like our left hammy isn't going to work like nearly as hard when I'm sprinting. Or if I've got some like, left hamstring issues, I'm not going to have great arm swing on my right side.
Yeah,
so like it's got this like cross connect phenomena that goes on.
Yeah, we touched on a little bit on, I think, Serrano's first podcast, because I was working with some pitchers at the time, like how do you assess, like how do you prevent injury, and like his first thing out of his mouth was the lat to protect that, and then he led into some of the hamstring, connectivity and the firing. So I guess like from an activation standpoint, you address the hamstrings first?
Yeah, so we'll do abs. So we'll crush a little bit of abs, because what that does is it puts my like back in a better position, because now I can actually leverage my psoas better without ever having to do shit from my psoas. Because really psoas work will also work the abs a little bit. Right? Yeah. So we'll do some like direct ab work, because then it puts me in a better position to leverage, like not leverage my erectors nearly as much. Okay. Right? Because my abs will pull me up into a bit of lumbar flexion. Okay. If I do it right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
what type of ab exercises?
Honestly, like it depends what we're training for the day. So if like we're doing like a bunch of like redirection work and like lateral like agility stuff, we'll do some oblique work, because I've got to be able to resist cutting back the other way. Yeah. Or if it's a bunch of inline work, we might just do some like just basic like flexion extension based work. Okay. So it kind of depends on what we're trying to train for the day. So we'll go through some of that stuff, and then I'll go through some like hamstring stuff. And I'm trying to work a hamstring in the most like maximally shortened position ever, to create leverage so that we can mimic the same joint angles that we do when we sprint. Okay. Right. So we go through some of this stuff, and now it sets me up. And then what you'll notice is it starts to creep up the hamstring. So it goes kind of from the belly to like the origin of it to like now it's up into my glute a little bit. And then we just hit these things when we go.
Then do you hit your glutes after that, obviously, or no?
So not so much. Like the glutes kind of come in with it. So they tie in at the same time. Okay. So we'll start from like lying on our back to, okay, now we're going to transition to some like modified supine stuff, like with the hamstring, and then we're going to get up on our feet, and I'll literally put someone in a position called like a pose method, pretty much, where like the Soviets used to use this all the time with their sprinters, because it's cold as shit out in the winter. So the last thing they do is they're just going to go outside and run on the track. Yeah. So what they would do is they would take a pose, like pretty much like whatever position that you were going to, the exact joint angles that you would run at. Right. So they would go up against a wall, and they would put their like lead leg into that same position. Like say if we're coming out of the blocks, it's going to be pretty steep. If I'm like close to max velocity, it's
I got
position angle. And what they would do is they would push down into the ground real hard, and then they would push forward into the wall real hard. So that's pretty much an ISO. Yeah. But it's mimicking the same joint angles that we have. And then I can raise or lower the heel depending on like what I want to work more. Yeah. So if I want to work the glute a little bit more, we'll keep the foot flat. Okay. And we might pump through the heel, or we might hit it through the midfoot. Now, if I want to work the calf a little bit more, we might raise the heel up. We might push through the ball of the foot. Or if I want to hit my hamstring a little bit more, we'll hit either center of the foot, or we'll go like inside ball of the foot.
I like that approach, just because like again, the wall doesn't get used a lot. Besides, like the only time I've used the wall to increase performance is like 40-yard dash training and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it's really like they're more focused on turnover, that we're not changing angles, we're not changing foot placement, and like that makes a lot of sense to me, just to be able to manipulate what you want to manipulate, and like work on what area of the running form that you want to improve on as well. I like that a lot.
So let me touch on one more thing with that. It's super beneficial from a rehab standpoint too, because when you fuck up like knee, hip, back, whatever, a lot of the time you will hit the ground. We look for like reactive stiffness. So when my foot hits the ground, does my heel collapse down and touch the ground, which now drives my knee forward, which puts me in a really shitty position. So the only thing that I can really leverage is my hip flexors and my low back to kind of pull my hip forward from that position.
That makes sense.
So what I'll look for is, coming back from injury, like right now I've got a high school 800-meter runner that I've been working with, and we've been going through pose method stuff. So what we're working on is I'm going to pop his heel up, because in this exact position, when I watch him run, his heel starts to just flatten out. So we're going to go pose method against the wall, and we're going to hit this thing here, and this kid is shaking like a fucking stripper, right? So he's got, like, he is all over the place. This foot is, like, just freaking out. His quad's twitching like crazy. His calf is going haywire. And I'm like, all right, we're going to hold this for 20 more seconds. And he's like, oh, fuck.
Let's go.
But when he goes out and runs on the track, so I had him do it, like, the following day, I was like, don't go for 20. We're just going to hit this thing for, like, a set of 5 seconds. Done. It's just, I want to feel this thing work, and then when it's good, it's good. And then he goes and hits, and he PBs.
Let's go. And that connection can happen that fast. It's like truly like I always use the analogy. It's like activating a glute before you work out. You can activate that firing pattern basically, or that connection.
Yep. So it's really just because it's it's dependent upon the person. Like some people might take a little bit longer. Other people it's like that. But the more that people practice this stuff, the faster it clicks, and it's like, cool, I got this now. So that way, when I hit the ground, it's like my brain recognizes, okay, I've been in this position before. I know what needs to work. It hits and it just carries. So we'll do some weird stuff where, like, I will try and target, like, specifically, like, the glute med, because people have a really bad, like, habit of, like, casting their hip out to the side. So we're losing some power that way. So we'll do this weird shit where we're like almost in a quarter squat position against the wall, but I'll kind of, like, manipulate their body a little bit to find that we can hit this glute med. And now we do this drill and we hold it for like 10 seconds, right? And then we'll just go back and forth for like maybe like a minute between each side, just doing all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, I'll just go walk. And then they'll walk, and it's hilarious because sometimes, one, I've actually had someone fall on their face before. But two, it's like they stumble. It's like they trip. And then they kind of get it smoothed out. And I was like, feels weird, right? And they're like, yeah. And it's almost like you're floating on air. And they're like, yeah, it's like something's pushing me forward because we're not losing any energy now. We're becoming so efficient when our foot hits the ground. My hip's not casting out to the side. It's just propelling me forward. So they step, and it's like it shoots them. It's like a slingshot every step.
Yeah. And so what's a good way to ask the question? Is there other ways to do that and manipulate that same response for other muscles in the body as well?
So I'll do it through the upper body as well. A really good person to learn this from, who I actually learned this from, is Dave O'Sullivan. All right, so he's the physio for England rugby.
Okay.
He's pretty damn legit. He's pretty much studied everything under the sun and then created his own system. So going through his mentorship, super helpful. But he's really big into Franz Bosch stuff. Right? Okay. So like co-contraction around a joint, working specific angles, getting things to help out. So we'll do some like bent arm stuff against the wall and load up, and like gradually we'll start with pressing like our fingertips into the wall and then kind of gradually going down the knuckles as hard as we can and then down to the palm. Right, but we got to do it with a bent arm and try and keep the same joint angle without leaning our body in. And you'll see people's arms just go haywire. They're shaking all the way over here. And I've actually had, like, this is super helpful in the clinic because it tells me how do you perceive load through the body. If you can't buffer the load through the arm, your instinct is now to shrug up, bow your elbow out, and now you've got it up into your neck. So I've had people with chronic neck pain who have been to, damn near everybody, and they can't figure out what's going on. And I put them up against the wall, and I'm like, all right, push in, let's see what we got. And that, like, shoulder is going all over the place. And I'm like, all right, like, where do you feel it? And they're like, oh, it's in my neck. And I'm like, okay, you can't buffer force, like, through your arm. And now it's only got one place left to go. You're just going to shrug it up into your neck. And that's why you've got this, like, chronic right-sided neck pain. So just to, like, prove a point, like, I'll tell them, I'm like, I'm not even going to crack your neck. I could easily do it, but we're not going to do it because I want to show you that it's not your neck that's the problem. It's your shoulder. Like, it's your arm. You can't buffer this force. And we'll go through a bunch of stuff. Like a couple of visits later, they're like, yeah, I've got no neck pain. Don't even touch their neck. It's literally just the arm that's the issue.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like the concept, like nothing in the body happens in isolation. Like, obviously, it's not just this one point that's bringing me my pain. But I like that because, like, that's like it's a variant of, like, your neurological mapping. Mm-hmm. Correct, yeah. Yeah,
a little bit. It's looking to see, like, what can handle forces, what can buffer forces. Because I do the same thing for the lower body. So if someone's like overextending on a skill, like say sprinting, and they're just cranking through the back and guys are getting pain or like coming up out of the blocks, well, now I know like there's not good co-contraction around that knee that's holding it still, allowing my hip to travel over top. What we're doing is we're almost shooting our knee back. So now I'm having to crank through my low back and my psoas to pop myself through out of this block. So same thing, like that pose method will work on that co-contraction around the joint and then not even have to touch their back, and then boom, it fixes the issue like that.
That's interesting just because I don't want to say I've seen that a lot, but like there's obviously an excessive amount of knee pain in the NFL, and I just haven't heard that root cause mentioned before. So like it's just
there's a lot of weird shit that goes on with it. So funny enough, the one of the hardest working muscles like is actually your soleus. like when we run. So unless
I think that makes sense, but the muscle is tough as fuck.
Yeah. So I think it's like, I can't remember I want to say it's over 9 meters per second. It starts to switch over to like the hamstrings and the glutes become the most dominant. But anything, I think between 5 and 9, I want to say, is like the soleus.
Interesting.
So the soleus delays that like knee locking out. It literally holds your knee still, which allows you to set up your hamstring, come forward, and then your glute to finish it off. So it's like what happens is like you'll see this. It's called like a soleus slouch. Got this from David Sullivan as well. That like I'll put people in this super awkward position. So we'll round our back out as hard as we can, right? And then we'll lean forward over our front foot, and I will literally put their like ball of foot up on like a rolled up towel. So our heel is just hanging off just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, push through your ball of foot as hard as you can. And now what happens is, since they're like so rounded out, they can't leverage their low back anymore. So some guys are like, I can't even push, right? So that just tells me I'm using my back to do everything. And then if we get it right, though, you'll see same thing, like their heel just going haywire, and then they just can't like maintain that position, and it tells me, okay, my soleus isn't doing my job. We're trying to recruit a quad or do something else to lock our knee out.
Interesting. So, so you're just in that position, you're isolating the soleus.
Yeah.
All right.
It's still some other stuff working in the process, but I can isolate the soleus because I'll poke around and be like, all right, well, where do you feel this? And I'll literally tweak people around until I'll put my hand or my thumb like right behind the actual knee. And they're like, oh shit, yeah, I feel that thing. It's like you can literally feel it like pop out against your thumb. And it's like, okay, we're going to hold this position. And like they start doing that, and then now knee pain's gone when they run.
That's awesome. What, just from my curiosity, like I understand a little bit, but the shaking neurologically, what is happening there? Like it's just
a battle back and forth between your muscles. It's literally just figuring out shit on the fly. It's throwing a bunch of solutions at it. So it's like, all right, well, let's contract this. All right, let's contract this. Let's do this. And it's literally just going back and forth until it figures out what's working the best. And then the signal gets smoothed out eventually, and you kind of recognize, okay, this is what's going to be the best thing ever. And the muscle starts working hard enough, it picks up the slack, and now this one thing is going to be doing the job. And now I'm not shaking anymore.
Until you solve the problem and the right thing's turned on, and efficiency is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, so I'm all about the shakes because now it shows me, okay, I don't have control over this thing here. Like that could be the reason why we have this pain. Let's go after these shakes, spend some time in it. Okay, now my shakes are gone. My pain's gone too. So obviously that was the issue. I
like that. I like that as like a tool or a metric to like at least kind of track where you lack control and maybe start solving. People can solve their own problems. And then just out of respect for your time, just because we're closing in, you got to get to work. But we kind of skipped the question, and we've obviously talked over the last few days too. Where are you learning? Where are you curious? Where are you chasing edges right now?
Right now, funny enough, real estate.
Yeah. Oh, let's go.
So trying to get in the real estate game a little bit. So I've been just reading through a bunch of books, digging through the Bigger Pockets forums and all that stuff.
Giddy up.
But as far as like edges wise, I would say I chase too many damn things, dude. I'm too ADHD.
Yeah.
So like I'll have a cool case where I'm like, shit, I got to study up on this thing, and I'll dive down a rabbit hole. And then the next day I'll get something completely different. I'm like, fuck, I got to learn about this thing now too. So I'll just bounce back and forth.
It's a lifestyle for you. Yeah.
And then at the same time I teach, so I got to be reading all my, because I have to teach accordance, it's stupid. I have to teach accordance to the textbooks, like what they want, even though it's not actually what happens in real life.
Yeah.
So like I'm going through like nutrition and metabolism stuff. So now I'm like, oh shit, I completely forgot about some of this stuff. So now I'm diving down some rabbit holes of metabolism and like how I can apply this. Like we talked about BFR the other day, and how I can manipulate like my glycolytic system to like essentially with BFR and all these other things. So I'll dive down that. I would say the thing that I'm getting back to, so I used to study this a bunch like while I was in school because I didn't really go to class, so I would just read some of these books.
You're getting smarter outside the classroom
exactly.
anyways. That was the 10 years of unlearning concept, yeah.
So for me, it was like neurology, like understanding like the impact of like the brain and everything else on how everything else works. So I like kind of mentioned like real quick before with like concussions and stuff like that, like how eye movement and all these things can play a role. I'll give you, what time is it? I'll give you like a quick little fact here. So with eye movements, like I'll have people that come in, usually it's like, I get a lot of like post-surgical stuff and they're completely fused in the neck, right? They can't move their head, can't turn, chronic neck pain, can't really function that well. And I can't go in and manipulate it. There's a reason that there's a metal plate in that neck, so they want to keep that shit
and you're
rigid.
Not trying to bend metal.
Yeah. So like, well, what can we do with this? I can massage into it. The problem is that I can't do anything to strengthen it or do anything with it because
you can't make it mobile or either.
You're locked in. So, well, now I got to be creative with what I do. So now I'm like going back to the days where I used to read all these, neuro textbooks, and I'm like, okay, let me put like pieces together here. So I can manipulate the eyes to manipulate the tension in my neck. So the ocular motor nerve is the thing that controls like eye movement, or at least one of them. So it controls a lot of eye movement, right? My ocular motor nerve like runs through my midbrain and it pierces through my red nucleus in the brain. Now the red nucleus is responsible for flexor tone. In humans, it's been found to go like just in the cervical spine. With monkeys, it's gone all the way down.
Okay.
So we're still learning a lot about it. But what I can do is I can screw around with my eyes and do like figure eights. I can trace letters. I can do all this stuff, and that will actually like knock down the tension in my neck because it stimulates that red nucleus, which then balances out that tone now. So without me having to do anything with you, just using your eyes, I can take away the tension in your neck.
Let's go.
But same thing, you can use that for concussions too, because with that, your eyesight gets completely fucked up.
Yeah, we wanted, so like just some of the symptoms I've seen, like I'm sure you have more comprehensive knowledge of it. Obviously, like the sensitivity to lights and those kind of things, but then the blurred vision in one eye that doesn't come back before the other one, things like that.
Yep. And then we talked about like midline shifts because I've got that too.
Yeah.
So I've had like 5 or 6 concussions.
You got some experience in the world too, yeah.
Yeah, so for me, my center point is shifted off to the right, so I always clip my left shoulder when I'm walking around a corner because I can't perceive that it's like I'm that close to the wall.
Which is crazy, which unless you notice it, address it, and try and solve it, you're not going to have this knowledge either. Yeah, which is
exactly.
But so what other symptoms of like the brain trauma does that can you manipulate with that? Did I miss that?
I would say like, so I can manipulate it from that standpoint of doing some of those things. I can also with concussions a little bit tricky because sometimes the same thing, like I can use the eyes, but I got to be careful not to overstimulate too. So that's the tricky thing with concussions, is that it's really about your brain is in an energy crisis. It wants to function, but it can only function so much. So you kind of have to play it by feel, because if I do like too much work, well, now my brain's fucked, and now I'm crashing back again, and I'm like, ah, shit, here we go.
Yeah, so some guys get like the pain behind their eyes too with the concussions too.
Yeah. So it screws with that system, and now we get like these pressure headaches and everything else. So again, like when guys are coming back from concussions, we'll use some of this like eye stuff as well to knock out some of the tone. But since they don't have hopefully they don't have a metal plate in their neck, I can adjust the neck to knock out some of the tone, which then helps out with some of the stuff in the brain as well.
Nice. So solve it from both ends of the
so
spectrum.
we take away those tension headaches that they've been getting, because usually when you get a concussion, your head's getting snapped around. So your neck becomes super tight, and then it's like a feedback mechanism. So you're just going back and forth between, okay, like I've got a headache, well shit, now my neck tightens up more, now I've got a worse headache, and it just keeps happening back and forth. I go through and I crack your neck, we break that cycle a little bit, and I knock out some of the tension. Now those symptoms aren't nearly as harsh, and now we can do some of these other things. No,
I like that solving approach. And then I've had some people ask too to try like do a TBI podcast in general, just like because I've like when I had my concussions, like doc put me through. Obviously got me on the alpha stim, put me through a month-long hyperbaric protocol, obviously changed my diet. And so like I think all that information should probably be out in the world at some point too. But I think we can probably have another conversation about this another time too.
Yeah, I can definitely dive deeper on that
stuff. Easy. I know you got to run. Appreciate your time.
Of course, man.
Yeah, where can people find you? I'm a fan of Dylan's Instagram, so he has some good exercise and good information on there. But yeah, holler at it.
So I go in spurts on Instagram. Like I'll go, it's usually like when I'm like slow at work and I just don't have a whole lot of shit going on, I'm like, I probably should be productive and put a bunch of shit up. So I think it's Dylan, D-Y-L-A-N, last name Seeley, S-E-E-L-E-Y, D-C. I think that's all it is. I don't remember.
Yeah, then where you at here in town? He's based in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, so work in a clinic up in Westerville, like right off of 270, so it's not that hard to find. And it's kind of sweet because we have the clinic, but we also got the gym in the back, so I can throw people under a bar. So that's why I love getting my lifting athletes in.
Yeah.
Because we can actually dick around and see what's actually going on, rather than some like pencil neck nerd telling you like, oh yeah, it's your hips shifting because of like you're tight this and that. And it's like, did you even throw them under a bar? Like, no. Well, what the fuck do they know then?
Yeah. But is that your own practice inside a gym? That's what I thought.
Yeah. So I work for somebody. So I'm an associate at the practice. But yeah, so I'm always, taking people on and stuff like that, just learning some of that stuff. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, I would say the Instagram, like the Dylan Seeley DC, is probably the easiest way. I shit post a lot on my Instagram stories, but I'll try and throw out some educational
That's just your
content.
Life. You can put whatever the fuck you want on
pretty
there.
Much.
Yeah,
until I get fired from my teaching job.
Your dog and all the hate. Yeah. No, I love it. But yeah, I just want so people can find you, especially because a lot of the listeners are from here in Columbus too, and I've been asked for recommendations for too. So hopefully pump the boy and fix some humans.
Yeah, hopefully so.
But, all right. Appreciate you, dude. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Yeah.